Jessy. Thanks for being here with us today to talk about some volunteer management.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Can you explain a little bit about your current role?
Yeah, right now I'm the executive director up at the North Valley Food Bank in Whitefish, Montana. I got that job right out of the MPA program, so good plug for this program. It certainly has set me up for success.
Yeah. And at what points in your career have you trained and supervised volunteers?
Yeah, really working in the nonprofit industry. As we all know, volunteers are sort of the the sustenance behind our organizations. So I started at Missoula Food Bank in 2009, and straight out of the gates, I was training and supervising volunteers. Up through right now, I'm still, in a sense, training and supervising. I wouldn't say supervising, but training board members to help them be successful in our organization. And I would say that the necessary qualities of a volunteer training program certainly would be the same in a board training program as a volunteer program.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that aspect of volunteer management when you are training and supervising volunteers. You are also training board members too to be an asset for your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And helping them set up for success and helping them understand what the expectations are and how to be the best volunteer board members that they can be.
That's great. Are there any lessons that you have learned about training and supervising volunteers the hard way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think anybody who has supervised volunteers could probably say that they've made mistakes along the way. I would say that we sort of joke about putting your big, soft nonprofit gloves on when communicating with volunteers, and I would say that that's a reality. Even though they work for the organization, the communication has to look very different than it might with a staff member. So when trying to provide additional support or critique, I have learned that it's important to be really careful about how that communication is, because they don't have to be there. They're not getting paid. They're providing a pretty incredible service to the organization, and so we have to be really gentle with making sure that they feel comfortable at the organization.
What are some good resources that you have used or know about to train and supervise volunteers?
Yeah, really. The number one way that I have learned to develop volunteer programming is to ask other nonprofit organizations. So what I've done is look out into the community and say, who's doing a really great job? And so when I supervised the Roots program, which is a monthly delivery program of groceries at the food bank, I reached out to Meals on Wheels, and I found out what their protocol were, and I helped adapt our training programs and our supervision program to align with some of with their goals.
That's great.
And another thing that I think is really important that is changing all the time is nonprofit or volunteer hub rather. And so they just have a wealth of information online on how to build nonprofit volunteer programs and how to make sure that you can retain those volunteers.
Yeah, do you have a formal process, like a manual and training that y'all are doing at the food bank?
Yeah, absolutely. And that started at Missoula Food Bank. We had, during the monthly grocery delivery program, I started to realize that volunteers needed a lot of information up front. They needed to know what to do in emergency situations, if they were uncomfortable, if they couldn't find a house. And so I developed at the food bank a pretty extensive orientation process so that every single one of the volunteers that came in knew exactly what our expectations were, how to get a hold of me if they needed additional support, and how to do their jobs appropriately. And I've translated that up to North Valley Food Bank. So we've got an orientation that goes on once a month to make sure, again, that we have consistent knowledge being communicated to every volunteer who walks through our doors. And that way they have a better understanding of what we need from them, and we all sort of know if it's a good fit or not. Um, and and so our director of operations at North Valley Food Bank has been able to adapt some of that to our work at North Valley, and our volunteers love volunteering there.
That's great. You've touched on some of this, but how do you think the training volunteers helps with volunteer retention, or does it?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that if volunteers don't know what they're doing, A, they're not going to feel needed, and B, they might feel confused. Another lesson that I've learned is that if you're not prepared to supervise volunteers and provide them with the necessary tools to be successful in their jobs, or even to know what the expectations are, they're not going to stick around. And so, absolutely, having a formal training and supervision program that includes ongoing training is key to helping make sure volunteers feel capable and competent in their roles.
That's great. What's one piece of advice for people who will train and supervise volunteers?
Yeah, I would certainly say that the biggest thing, again, is to make sure that you communicate your expectations in a welcoming way to everybody who walks through the doors so that they understand what they're getting into and that they understand your organization's culture so that they're able to be successful and want to stick around and tell their friends that it's a great place to volunteer.
Well, thanks again for your time today. Hopefully, you're all able to take something away from Jessy's expertise. That's all I've got.
Great. Thanks so much, Anna-Margaret.